I don't need an introduction. Why do you know your last name is Tristan? I just changed it. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning from across the ditch. Alright, two things to know about me from my birth. I was born and raised Catholic, and I was named Peter Joseph. Those two things are actually quite an importance for me in my journey with MCC, and it wasn't until last night that it actually dawned on me about the journey that I've taken. So I was born and raised in a very large family, have 8 brothers and sisters, enough nieces and nephews, and now we're on to the grandnieces.
A good Catholic family.
Very oh, look, we're at church every Sunday. So fast track into my adult years, I always sought out a church wherever I lived. Catholic, obviously, to a certain point. Then I moved to Sydney and I was a shift worker. We'd get to Christmas and I would have to work, say, Christmas Day or Christmas night. And so I wasn't always able to be with my family. And I was reading the local community press and there was an ad saying there was a Christmas Eve service on it, our Sydney Town Hall, like our centrally main town hall in Sydney. So I went along to it, and that was my introduction to MCC. So for the next couple of years while I was still shift working, I would always go on the Christmas Eve service. And then a few years later I moved, because I was living on the eastern side of Sydney, and the Petersham Church that I attend now, MCC Sydney, is actually on the inner west side. So for me to actually travel there, for me it was past George Street, as we say, so it's like you need a passport to actually venture out. I ended up moving to the inner west, and I actually had to go past Petersham Station on my way home, so I thought, well, I now have no excuse. So in 2005 I started attending MCC regularly. Then I had a job, I moved out of shift working into a contract event management role, and that role finished up in September 2007, so I went travelling for a little bit. I came back and thought I'll find a job, no worries. 2008 came and everybody sort of closed shop in terms of recruitment and stuff, so I was unemployed for about a year. Then July that year, 2008, I was visiting MCC, I was in Sydney, so I went to the church, and someone said to me there, "What's holding you from coming back to Sydney?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a job for starters, and I don't have anywhere to live." And they said, "Well, my sister has a room, so you know, we can ask her and you could stay there for a few days while you get yourself sorted." I was like, okay. And the sister said yes. So I ended up moving back to Sydney. I then found work because at the time there was a lady who worked for a recruitment agency going to MCC Sydney, and she agreed to help me find some work. So I then started working. And just as I started then working was around the time of the Summer Olympics, and there was an Australian who changed his name to Kamikaze I think he's a bike rider. And it kind of dawned on me because for about 15 years or so people had been calling me PJ. And I kind of it's not that I didn't like Peter Joseph, but I was more PJ in terms of who I felt I was. So then I made that decision after telling my parents first before I did anything that I was going to change my name to PJ. And it was more for professional reasons than personal, and that caused a bit of tension in our family, a little bit. But my parents were still, "You're still our son, we don't agree with what you're doing, we'll love you anyway," and we sort of walked through that journey, so I changed my name. And then probably about a month or two later, I made the decision to kind of close the chapter on my Catholicism and became a member of MCC Sydney. So for me to actually become a member of another church was a very big step, because it's not something that I ever thought I would do. From 2008 to now, I've probably had more spiritual growth and more personal growth in my life because of MCC than what I've ever had in my whole life. Because for me as a Catholic, when I would attend services and stuff, it was very kind of us and them. So the priest at the front and the choir, if you're in some of the churches that were quite high, they'd sing in Latin and all those funny words and stuff like that, and so I couldn't quite connect always with that service. But then when Crave started at MCC Sydney, it kind of opened me up a little bit more. And so then Crave sort of went from a once-a-month service to a once-a-fortnight service to a weekly service. And then the history of our church is kind of, I guess it's always been political, well, ever since I've been there. So we'd have a pastor and the pastor would leave, and then we'd go through all of this stuff because we didn't have a pastor, and then we'd get another pastor and then that pastor would leave. Again, we'd go through all this stuff. As a result of, whether it be people's burning out or whatever it was, we went from a team at the evening service, which is the contemporary style service, of about 15 people actively involved in helping out, down to 2, and then those 2 people said, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a line now, I need to sort of separate myself from the church. God calls people. Guess who he called? So, with no theological training, with only being guided by my faith, myself and another guy stepped up, and with some coaching from other people, we started then leading services in the evening, because I wanted to maintain that contemporary style, because I actually feel there's more of a connection when we're able to sing and dance and laugh and clap and all those fun things in church. So that was kind of my spiritual journey. In relation to other stuff that I've been involved in our church, we have a board of directors, and we also have a church life council. So the board does all the governance and admin stuff. Church life council basically does everything else, so responsible for worship, any social activities, spiritual and all that sort of stuff. So I started off on what we call the CLC. I then had a time on the board, and then earlier this year I stepped away from the board, and I kind of lifted a weight off my shoulder, but I also put in a boundary that said, after General Conference this year, I will then make my decision about what I do next. Because I really didn't know what God was calling me to do. And to a certain degree, I still don't. So I think what I wanted to say today is kind of what Karl said at the beginning about what will happen tomorrow with spiritual gifts. In that, if you are open to yourself and to God working in you, and willing to push yourself just that little bit more, even if it's something that you don't feel comfortable doing. I never thought I would be standing up giving my testimony and talking about how great MCC is and all that sort of stuff. I never thought I would lead a church service in my life. I never thought I would preach, and I've done all of those things. I've also completed the LEAD program, the Laity Empowered for Active Discipleship, which is a program that MCC offers, and it's open to everyone. So there's another opportunity for you to grow and learn about MCC and be involved. So I just wanted to sort of plant that seed now for stuff that we'll do this afternoon and for stuff that will happen tomorrow.